Sebastian Junger is an author, filmmaker, and award-winning war correspondent. His book, The Perfect Storm, was adapted into a major motion picture starring Kentucky native George Clooney. And his debut documentary film, Restrepo, was nominated for an Academy Award. Junger's most recent book, In My Time of Dying, How I Came Face to Face with the Idea of an Afterlife, is a scientific, philosophical, and deeply personal examination of mortality and what happens after we die. Sebastian Junger is joined in conversation with Rachel Martin, the co-creator and host of the podcast Wildcard, an interview game show about life's biggest questions. She was the founding host of NPR's award-winning morning news podcast, Up First, and spent 6 years as the host of Morning Edition. Martin also served as national security correspondent and foreign correspondent for NPR. Recorded at the University of Louisville, Kentucky Author Forum, this is Great Conversations. Sebastian Junger and Rachel Martin.
Well, I am thrilled to be here, and thank you to all of you for joining us at the Kentucky Author Forum. Sebastian, thank you for doing this.
Thank you. I'm thrilled as well.
I mean, those who are familiar with your work, myself included, there is a through line, I think it is fair to say, if we just listen to the intro. You have been writing about situations where people are almost dying for a long time.
Yeah.
What is it about that particular experience? And in this case, in my time of dying, now it's about you. But if you look back at your career, you are in these scenarios, you are putting yourself in these experiences where you're walking right on that line between life and death.
Well, for hundreds of thousands of years, human life has been very precarious. And it's only recently that a pretty affluent Western society has been able to make the threat of hardship and of starvation, pain, of suffering, of death, keep it from being a daily threat to most people, right? And but it's in those areas that life is at its most dramatic, in this sort of terrible binary. You're either alive or you're dead. In that binary, we find meaning to existence. And as I say in my book, if we lived forever, life wouldn't mean that much, and endless do-overs until nothing means anything, right? So, you know, as a young man, I tested myself in many ways. I was a climber for tree companies. I did the aerial work for tree companies around Boston, working 80, 90 feet in the air with a running chainsaw, hanging on a rope, taking trees down in pieces. You know, you make a mistake and you die. You know, it's this sort of liminal place. And then I started covering wars, likewise, liminal places where the consequences are huge, and therefore life is huge. Mm-hmm. You know, and that was sort of, I grew up in a safe suburb. You know, I was looking for a huge life, and I found it in these places that were risky. You know, I've almost been killed a number of times in war zones, but I haven't I've never experienced dying. Until now. Like, I didn't know what it felt like to die. And that finally came to me in the 58th year of my life. And that's why this book is so personal. It's the only book I've written that's really quite personal.
I think it's helpful for context to talk a little bit about your ideas of living, dying, what doesn't come after that. Before this happened, like when you were growing up, just tell me a little bit about your parents and what they talked to you about.
Yeah, so my mom was sort of a New Age spiritualist and imbued things like crystals and feathers with all kinds of magical powers. And
I mean, they have magical powers.
Oh, right, clearly, yes. Yeah, right.
Let's be clear.
Yeah. My father, on the other hand, was a physicist and an atheist and a rationalist. And you can imagine the conversations between them, right? And
good ones,
But I was always, I sort of fell for the rationalist team, right? That was the baseball team I was always rooting for because they always seemed to win, right? And so that's where I've always been is, in this place of sort of like, if things don't make sense rationally, then I don't believe them to be literally true. And what I find, the way I sort of reconciled this is that, people need two things. They need explanations and they need stories. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to confuse them. So there are stories, starting with, Santa Claus for your children, that are lovely. They're just not literally true, right? But they serve an important emotional purpose. The idea of God in an afterlife, in my opinion, is one of the loveliest stories. It's our favorite bedtime story. It reassures us in the dark of the night, right? But you don't want to test them because they'll fall apart, right? Explanations are super important. We fly airplanes because there's a rational explanation for why they stay aloft. It involves the airfoil and sufficient thrust, right? And if those explanations don't make sense, we don't get on the airplane, right? So what you don't want to do is confuse explanations and stories. And you definitely don't want to test the stories because it's embarrassing to them. And we need those stories. We all do, even the rationalists. And so for me, what I was trying to do with this book is not to tell a reassuring story, which we all need. Other people have done that very, very well. I wanted to try to explain in rational terms what I experienced while I was dying, because it defied everything that I believed as a rationalist and as an atheist.